Hi, this is Charlotte Loesch with Premium Screenplay, and today I'm here with Annie Nishida, a television writer and visual artist who has written and developed shows for the Lego Group, Nickelodeon, Disney, Hulu, and DreamWorks. Annie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Glad to be here.
Before we get started with all the technical questions, I just want to ask, what are you watching right now?
Oh no. Currently I'm watching the new season of The Umbrella Academy. I have 2 more episodes left because it's a short season. But yeah, obsessed with Umbrella Academy, mostly because I love Gerard Way and My Chemical Romance.
That's a very valid reason to watch that show, though. I do that too. I'm like, anything with like Timothy Chalamet, I'm like, I honestly don't really care what it is. Like, yeah. I'm there. I'm in the theater. I'm sat. I already have my popcorn. Yeah. I don't know. I'm the same way. It also says on your LinkedIn, not to be a stalker, but it says on your LinkedIn that you're a self-proclaimed paranormal enthusiast. And I want to know more about that. Have you seen ghosts? Should we be worried? Please update us. We need to know.
I don't think we need to be worried because I feel like, okay, so for sure, like I think ghosts exist. I think most of them are not like poltergeisty, or like I haven't encountered any like evil dark ones. Like there was a time where I went to Gettysburg, which is supposed to be like very haunted. This is when I was like 13 years old, and we were like doing like a little tour, and like something like kept touching my hair. I was like, what is happening? I was like the last person in my tour group, so there's no one behind me. I was like, something is touching my hair. What is that? And then we went back to our hotel room, and there was like just a random bra and a man's sunglasses like in our hotel room, and it wasn't there before. And I was like, this is either a ghost or like something is like very wrong here. But I think
either way. Yeah. Oh my God. I personally haven't had any experiences with ghosts, but my grandma said she saw a ghost, and I believe my grandma, so I'm with you. Hopefully we don't have any ghosts crashing our call today. We'll see. Thank you so much for chatting. You have an extremely impressive career in writing and visual art and television animation. So I want to just like go on the journey of your career. I know that you went to school at USC for television writing. So tell me about that, and like what was the one thing. I know school is awesome and you take away a million things, but what's maybe like the one thing that really sticks out to you about your time there and what you learned?
Yeah, so my time at USC was really fun. So the screenwriting program, which was the one that I did, that's a BFA. Maybe I didn't get smarter because they're like, you don't need math or science or like a foreign language, like just like write all the time.
Comedy
like,
class. Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a John Hughes class.
Hey, I would rather take that over calculus any day. So.
Oh, this is also a tangent, but we did have to take like some GEs, and I would look for like the easiest ones to take, and there was one called like the Nature of Science or something, and I was like, that sounds easy. It's like a geology class because it's a geology, and then it ended up being like quantum mechanics. It's like, oh my God.
You accidentally shot yourself in the foot. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, like this seems unfair.
I'm sure everybody in the class was like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. But in the film school, I had a great time. Again, very fun. There were I think there were 29 of us in our class. So we kind of just like hung out with like the same group of people, and our classes were also very, very small, like 8 people, maybe, where we would just like read each other's work, give feedback, and then just like revise for it. It was great. You get to know people that way. You get to know how they work, what they like to write. But I feel like just being in that environment is very helpful, especially because like our TV classes were treated like writers' rooms around a table, like pitch things and like try to make something better. Like everyone's working together. And I'm actually very glad that I had that experience, because if I hadn't, my first room, I would have been like, what is happening? We're not actually just like typing on keyboards, like we're just talking here. Yeah.
Exactly. That I feel the same way. I went to Chapman and studied writing, and our classes were very similar, and I feel like the culture, being able to like be immersed in that super early on is really helpful. And I'm sure it was helpful for you because you worked in many writers' rooms after that. You do a lot of visual art as well as writing. So I'm curious if which creative draw happened to you first? Like, were you like doodling in your notebook in third grade, or were you like writing poems? What was like sort of which one came first, and yeah, just how they interact with each other?
So writing definitely came first. Just like back to the paranormal thing. So like from like a very young age, like I knew that I wanted to be like Fox Mulder from the X-Files, or I wanted to be a writer. So
only two options.
yeah, exactly. I was like, one of these is gonna happen. I don't know which one it's gonna be.
Who knows? You could have a secret double life we don't know about, and it could be 2-1.
But yeah, it was definitely the writing. And I've literally only taken like one art class, and that was in high school. It was just like the basic like art class in my senior year because I had stupidly signed up for like AP Physics, and then like I went to the first day of class and I was like, nah, I'm gonna take something else.
Fair. Very fair. Writing came first for you. After college, what came next? What was like your first step post-grad into the adult world?
That's a good question. I will say it took me about 5 years to actually like break in as a professional writer. Because coming out of school, they made us take this class where they basically tell you like, this is how you can break in. There are so many different ways. You can go the assistant route, or you could just like you cannot do that, and you can try to be creatively fulfilled in other ways, and just like try to make something happen that way while you work like a struggle job and try not to die. And I was like, yes, that's the one I want to do, because I cry very easily. And I was like, assistant? No, I can't do that. No.
Unless you had a bucket to carry with you to like hold your tears in, that would be.
Yeah, exactly.
So you decided to go this route. Yeah. What did that look like for you?
I worked a lot of strange jobs. So like I worked at an ice cream shop, mochi ice cream shop that does not exist anymore. So I worked as a photo booth attendant, which meant that I just like took somebody's photo booth to weddings and set it up, and then just sat there for like 5 hours, and then like took it home at like 1 a.m. Also fun. So yeah, just like working like jobs like that, and just like trying to keep writing as much as I could. And I think the timing was very good at some point, because I am an Asian American person. I like to write Asian American stories, and eventually this movie called Crazy Rich Asians came out, and then I think people started to be like, ooh, Asians, they're in, they can be funny.
You're like, now's my time.
Yeah, it's like I've been here, but cool. If that makes you like my script more, then great.
Then sure, go for it.
Yeah. So I had a script, and it was a half-hour pilot about an Asian American girl who wants to be a rapper and learns that appropriation bad. Be your own person, but you can also still rap. But yeah, so I entered that in a few competitions, and it was like either making it to the finals or winning whatever I entered it into. And I don't think the competitions per se were like super helpful. And I also won zero money or anything for these, but it did let me know that like somebody or like multiple people could read a script that I wrote and be like, this isn't trash.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh, okay. So
Yeah.
I can send this to like professional people,
Mm-hmm.
and it will be at least like not immediately thrown away.
At least that, yeah, no, that's a good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. And from there I was like, okay, I guess I should like try to find like a rep. Yeah, let's do that.
Mhm.
And I think I like Googled or found it. I don't know. I found there's a list of like every management company, like, and it has their email addresses and like if they take like submissions or not. I was like, oh, interesting. And there were like 100 emails on this list. So I
Mhm.
sent like 100 emails just being like, hey, I have the script. It won this. I went to USC. Here's a log line. Let me know if you want to read it. And I got a few responses. I met with a few different companies and I ended up signing with one of them. So querying works, or it did work like 5 years ago. I don't know if it still works now, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. No, that's great to know because I feel like one of the scariest things about Hollywood and the entertainment industry is that everybody has a completely different path. And so it's so like you can get advice and follow other people's footsteps, but like at
Hmm.
the end of the day, it's whatever choices you make. So it's interesting to hear the sort of succession of how things happen. So you found representation. What happened next? What was like the next steps for that? Were you nervous? Were you excited?
Yeah, I was both. um, and it didn't really change anything. Like having a, so I signed with a manager and it didn't really change much. Like I got a couple meetings. I was like, okay, still not staffed. I still have not been paid for anything. And then after like a couple months, maybe 6 months or something, my manager was like, hey, do you want to meet like with this agent? Like just to like for like staffing reasons, just to like broaden the scope of like where you can meet. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I went to meet with this agent and then I ended up signing like immediately. And then I think it was almost exactly a week later, I got a call and my agent was like, you have a showrunner meeting. You want to go to it? And I was like, yes. So that was my first showrunner meeting. And I did end up staffing from that one meeting. So everything
Yeah.
happened like slow and then
Very
immediately.
fast. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, wow. That no, that's what was the show? What was that first show?
That was Gabby Duran in The Unsittables for Disney Channel.
Okay. Perfect. And then from there, the floodgates opened and things sort of happened from there. That is a great sort of lesson in like I think a lot of people are very bogged down with the feeling of like nothing's happening, I'm so
Mm-hmm.
lost. But to know that there is potentially something right around the corner and things can happen very
Mm-hmm.
quickly, that's like
Mm-hmm.
a good example of one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
Right.
you were,
Yeah.
yeah, you were staffed, and I know you've also done a lot of freelance stuff as well. So I'm curious if you can talk about the differences between freelance writing versus being staffed on a show.
So freelance is interesting because you are often not in a room, or if you are, it's for like 4 hours and then that's it. Where it's like it'll be they call them summits. So you'll brainstorm with like a team of other freelance writers. And then you bring in your ideas, you pitch your little ideas, and then the summit ends, and then you like get a script assigned to you after the summit, maybe weeks later, maybe a month later, and then it's just you. So like you're basically interacting with like one person, like the head writer of the show. So like very, very individual work based versus being in a room and working with others to break a story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's more difficult, I'm sure, like by yourself as opposed to having like people to lean on. Is that something that you like working in rooms more?
I mean I like both. I think yeah, I like that energy from other people. in a room or Zoom room, whatever the situation is. But I also, like, the way I work, like, I write very fast if I'm alone. So I feel like I work faster freelancing, but it's a little bit more enjoyable in a room.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. That makes total sense. Yeah. I know that you've written for animation, you've written over 30 episodes of animated TV, and you've also written for live action as well. So, for you, what are the sort of small differences that you notice when you're writing for a live action for people versus when you're writing for animation?
The writing is essentially the same. They're all scripts. They're all formatted the same. It is the same type of work. Like in animation, like the sound effects are in like little carrots and all caps. Like that's how you know you're reading an animation script or not.
Okay, pro tip: look for the carrots.
Yeah, and you do have to step things out just a little bit more in animation because after you write the script, it like goes to like the board artists and then it goes to the animators. So just it's being touched by a lot of different hands, and the more you can kind of step things out, like the less like confusion there will be. But it's not like you're writing a novel. It's not like prose. It's just like maybe I don't know. You a little bit more description, just a tiny bit more.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense because the visuals are, I feel like, very important in animation versus live action. There's a little bit more like go with the flow, but animation's like, okay, we have to make it. We have to do it all. So we need to know what we're doing. So that kind of makes sense to me that it would be slightly more descriptive. Do you have a preference in terms of like writing for animation versus writing live action?
Not really. It's pretty much the same thing, same exact thing.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Off of that, I know that you've worked on a lot of shows that are geared towards younger audiences, as well as doing like adult animation. So, what, for the people watching who have never written like for younger audiences for children's TV, what are the sort of things that you have to keep in mind when you're writing? And like, what are some things that maybe people don't think about that you are very aware of when you're writing?
Ooh, I mean, you probably know this, or anybody who watches like kids TV probably knows this, but like each episode usually has like a theme or like a lesson. Like be nice, something like that. So like all
Friends
the conflict, all the conflict stems from like this one issue that does get solved at the end, because the episodes do have to be somewhat educational while being entertaining at the same time.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I'm like thinking back to the Disney Channel of my childhood and like Wizards of Waverly Place, Hannah Montana. Like you don't notice it when you're watching it as a kid, but when you go back, you're like, oh, wow, this is very like clearly has a strong message. Which I guess, in that way, does that sort of like framework, I feel like that would be helpful in like writing other things where you like have a very clear internal compass in terms of messaging, even though like in other genres or in other forms it's obviously not going to be as overt. But is that something that maybe like I feel like it would be a little helpful to sort of have that foundation?
Yeah, I think so. So that's kind of how I write anyway. Usually I think of like what do I want to say? Like, and this is just like with original projects. Like what story do I want to tell? So it kind of gives you just like a North Star to be like, oh, like bring it back now. Like what are we talking about here?
Yeah, let's ground ourselves for a minute.
Yeah.
Where are we?
Yeah.
Speaking about things that you personally like to write, what are sort of the genres that you gravitate towards? I know you said Asian American stories, and we talked about you liking or being a paranormal enthusiast. What are the kind of other genres that you gravitate towards?
I'm only a comedy writer. Every time I try to write a drama, I'm like, oh, no, no jokes. Okay, fine. All right.
But that's the sign of a good comedy writer, I think. If you, by force of habit, by sheer not, you're unconsciously adding jokes. That's when you know.
And I like genre a lot. So like horror comedy is like my favorite thing in the world. And I think those
Yeah.
things work really well together because again, all about timing, all about like subverting what you expect. I like mythology a lot. Just background about me, I love the show Supernatural.
So good.
This is so good. And I find that I rewatch the show a lot as well. And I'm always like, yeah, it's always a vampire. It's always a werewolf. But there's like other mythologies. Like if we just like step outside this like little Western mythology bubble, like there's other cultures that we can explore. So it's like specifically like I really like to explore like various mythologies. And yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. I agree. It's always vampires, werewolves. So I'm now craving these other monsters. I want to know more. That I especially feel like genre comedy is too, like horror comedy or like mystery comedy. It's there's so many elements, so it's oftentimes hard to pull off, but when it hits, it hits because you're exactly right. It's all about timing. It's all about planting and payoff. And I feel like comedy, especially like with being a comedy writer, I feel like would be helpful in writing other things because you already have the understanding of like, okay, this is how to surprise people. This is how to shock people, but I'm just doing it in a slightly different variation, just a slightly different flavor.
Right.
I know outside of TV, you also write and illustrate books. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I don't draw particularly well. I don't think like I'm not a bored artist because I'm not good enough. I'm not fast enough, and again, I cry easily. So stress.
Watercolor
stress
maybe.
Yeah. But I make like little comics and little zines that I kind of sell at like various events, like zine fests or like art markets. And I think, well, I actually started doing that before I got staffed, before I started working professionally. And I did that because eventually I got tired of being like, here's a script. Mom, read this. Like no like normal person is gonna read a script. Great job. I understand what you're doing here. But if you like hand them like a comic, they'll be like, oh yeah, pictures. Very few words. I get it.
No, I get that. It's way easier to get people to watch or look at things than it is to read things. So I guess it's just tricking people into into reading your stories. I feel the same way. In terms of writing comics and writing zines and short stories, is there like for you a different creative part of your brain that you have to access, or it all just sort of comes very naturally?
I think I don't know what came first, but I think visually, and I write visually because I think visually, but like I don't know if that's like because of like the comic stuff or because I just watched too much TV as a kid.
No such thing as too much TV. We know that.
Like, yeah, did I watch too many cartoons? Is that just how my brain works now?
You close your eyes and it's just always SpongeBob and the little
Yeah.
jellyfish. And
Yeah.
yeah. I know that, I mean, you're doing so much creative stuff. So I'm curious how, like, you sort of remedy the phenomenon of like writer's block, or like if you're feeling stuck with something and you really don't know where to go with an idea, what are some things that you say to yourself, that you do to help you sort of like relax more into the creative state and help you move forward with the project?
Hmm. A lot of the time, I just like push through. I'm like, okay, like just like it's fine. Like you can go back and you can
Mm-hmm.
fix whatever you want. To just like keep things moving, I think is like super helpful, and just like telling yourself it's okay if it sucks right now, because
Yeah.
it won't suck eventually. You just like gotta get it down.
Yeah, yeah. No, one of the best pieces of writing advice that I ever got was one of my old professors, and he said, "Write fast, write bad." And
Hmm.
that is 100%. I mean, that's like kind of the gist of what you were saying. It's like you can
Hmm.
always go back, you know. There's
Hmm.
never like nobody's going to steal your laptop in the middle and read what you
Yeah.
wrote and be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is horrible. You'll never write again."
Yeah.
Like that's never going to happen. Sometimes getting the bad ideas out, I feel, or
Hmm.
the bad ideas, the ones that don't work first, getting that
Hmm.
out allows you to like, okay, I have it down. Now what else? You
Hmm.
know, it
Yeah.
lets you sort of have more creative freedom. It puts less pressure on yourself, I guess.
Hmm.
At least I feel that
Hmm.
way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like once you have like a first draft, like even if it's bad, you're like, oh, like I did it. Like look,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
here.
exactly, exactly. When you're writing, what are you like, okay, I have a game plan. I know exactly where this story is going to go. Or are you the kind of person where you like have a little seed of an idea, or you have even maybe just like a setting or a person, and then you just kind of run from there?
I I think it can happen any way. I am an outliner
Mm-hmm.
because just writing without without knowing where to go, I'm like, I actually I don't like this. This is scary. So I outline definitely. I think about character a lot before I start to write.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely I think of a theme
Mm-hmm.
or just something I want to say, message.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm not like a free flowing kind of writer.
No, I know some people are that way, and I understand it, but I also don't understand it. So
Yeah.
it's to each their own, you know.
Hmm.
when you when you're writing and you're coming up with ideas, what are you like going to people and brainstorming, or do you like fully flesh out something and then give it to someone else? Is it for you basically, is it helpful to get feedback early on, or do you like to wait?
I like to wait. Like I don't have like a writers group or anything.
Mhm.
And I don't have like people that I send things to. Like I'll send things to my reps and I'll get their feedback. But I feel like I know what tone I like, which is
Mhm.
very specific.
Mhm.
And then I let my reps tell me if things are too weird or like what I need to change.
Yeah, okay. That
Yeah.
I feel that. I feel that. You speak your truth first and then let
Yeah.
other people, because a lot of times I also feel like if you get advice too early, you can kind of like
Hmm.
cut yourself off, you know, instead of like
Hmm.
you allow yourself the space to just create what you want. Like there's an
Hmm.
opportunity there to get there, and maybe getting advice beforehand is not as beneficial. In terms
Hmm.
of um writing, I want to ask you about pitching as well, because that's something that I think a lot of writers get scared of. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a daunting thing, to like have your baby and present it to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And to do so in an effective way is very hard. So for someone like you who's been involved with a million different projects and has pitched and probably been pitched to in the past, what for you makes a good pitch?
Oh, I'm like, what advice can I give? So I think pitching is scary,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand that. I also, like, everyone thinks it's scary. Like, I watched there was an event, like a virtual event, I think it was through the WGA, like Women's Writers Committee, where we just listened to very veteran writers like go through a pitch that sold. Like, I watched the Hacks pitch,
Mm-hmm.
and there so this was all written down. We basically read this in the room. So, like, I feel like that is super helpful to know. Like, Hacks, like, they literally read from a paper. You don't have to memorize things. It's not about like this big, like, it's not a big production. It's you trying to get your point across. I think pitches do have to have very specific things. Like, you need a log line, obviously. Like, what is this show? You need to tell them a little bit about the world. You need to go into your characters, let them know who they're going to be watching if they buy this show. Pilot story, maybe like at least an area of like what a first episode would be, and then like some episode examples. And I think all of these things just shows whoever you're pitching that this has been thought through. This can be a show.
Yeah, I didn't come up with it on the car ride over here.
Yeah. But again, I think, it's not as scary as it sounds. Because I think the big thing for me was like, oh no, I have to memorize everything, and I can't look at my notes. But like, no, people are looking at their notes. Like, it's good.
Okay, that is a good like practical tip, I think, to know, because like you were saying, at least in my mind, like the sensationalized version of pitching is like a big boardroom of scary men in big suits, and you go up there, and if you look down at a note card once, they kick you out immediately and you never work again. So it's good to know that, people don't have to have things memorized, as long as it's compelling, as long as there's key elements, like what the show's about, characters. That's all you need. In terms of networking, that's another thing that I think is a little daunting to people who maybe are just breaking into the industry and don't have as many connections. For you, what would be like your top networking tips?
I'm a big fan of just like DMing people on social media or like on LinkedIn. So if I'm watching a show and there's an episode I really like, and I'll be like, oh, does this person have like an Instagram or a Twitter? And if they do, I'll usually DM them and be like, hey, I really liked this episode that you wrote. Let me know if you have 15 minutes for a virtual Zoom. And a lot of the time that works, especially in animation, because people are very, very nice. And also a lot of us are like not working right now. So we have time. I know that sounds kind of scary to just like cold DM people, but I was also, I was in like a virtual like general yesterday with like a group of people talking to a showrunner. And that was his advice too, to just like reach out to people. Like, the worst they could do ignore you or say no.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even 5 years down the line, if you encounter them, they're not going to remember that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. Like, it's fine. Just do it, because like the positives outweigh the negatives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a very good tip. I think it is so scary, I think, to just cold reach out to people, but you're exactly right that the worst that can happen is nothing.
Yeah.
The worst thing that can happen is nothing happens, which is already happening, so it's fine.
Yeah.
The circle of that is kind of hard to say out loud, but we get it. Yeah, networking is one of those things where I think also a lot of young people don't want to feel like a burden to the people that they're reaching out to. What would you say, like, just emotionally and self-confidence wise, to young people who are like maybe having imposter syndrome about where they are, or nervous about like coming off too strong in terms of like meeting people and just sort of entering the industry?
Yeah, I would say if you're reaching out to people who are like at a different point of their careers than you are, don't go into it being like, oh, they're gonna read my script. Like, I have, like, that's the goal, to like get them to read my script. Like, that's not the goal. A lot of the time, that's not gonna happen. They're not gonna ask for a sample. Like, the goal here is to make a connection, and you don't want that to be like the first and last time you talk to that person. Like, you want to treat them like as a friend versus as like a stepping stone. So yeah, just to take some of that pressure off and be like, it's not a life or death situation. Like, we're just having a chat.
It's just people. That's a very good lesson. It's just people. Even if it's online, it may not feel real. They're still human. You can still chat about ghosts and all the shows you like, and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Since we're on the topic of like advice, what advice would you give to somebody who is thinking, oh, I want to go into writing, I want to be a professional writer, but they have no idea what first step to take? What is some advice that you would give them?
I think this is really annoying because I get annoyed when people tell me this. Like, if you have a show that you really like, look at the scripts, like, see how things are formatted, like, see how things are laid out on the page, and just kind of like get the structure down, like, in your brain. Like, oh, on page 10, like, this usually happens. Like, oh, okay, like, that must be like an act break if we still had act breaks because streaming. So, like, yeah, just kind of, like, reading is super helpful. Also, writing your own stuff, super helpful. Like, you can't, if you want to be a writer, like, you have to write, even if it's bad, even if you think it's bad, it might not actually be that bad, because I've done a lot of coverage, like, as an intern, and like 99% of that stuff is bad. Those are professional writers. So
well, it's jumping off of that, doing coverage, you read so many scripts as an intern. I know so many people who are interns and they read a million scripts. For you, what is one thing where you read a script and it's an immediate red flag? What are some, like, oh, you start reading a script, you see this happen, or you see this, and then immediately you're turned off from the script?
yeah, I mean, I'm not like a stickler for like formatting or anything. I know people are like, you don't worry, we see, or like, I don't care about that. If something is like extremely offensive, like racist, I'm like, nah. Or if there's like a really like offensive description of a woman, I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And yeah, the baseline, I think, a little bit. So it's good to, it's crazy though that sometimes you do see those things and you encounter them and you're like, wow, I never thought that I would have ever seen this, or that people actually are
Yeah.
okay with that.
Yeah.
On the inverse of that question, what are some things when you're reading a script that make you go, oh my gosh, I like, stick out to you as green flags? Like, even if it's just like smaller moments, what are things like maybe about character or story or just like premise in general? What are some things that you notice in scripts that you're immediately like, okay, this is something that I can work with?
Oh god, this is like a little bit amorphous, but if I'm like reading something and then I don't realize like I'm reading, I'm like, like, oh, like this, I'm just like kind of listening to a conversation, like I want to keep like eavesdropping on this. Again, this is like not super helpful, but something that just like pulls me in and doesn't do anything to like distract me, I guess. I don't know what I'm talking about. Just like characters. I like characters. I like, yeah, just if I can feel like I'm watching a show or a movie as I'm reading something, then I'm like, yeah.
No, that I feel the exact same way. When you are reading a script and you're painfully aware of you're sitting in a coffee shop, your coffee is almost done, it's watery at this point, you just want to go home, you're only on page 78 and there's still 30 more. Those kinds of things, you're like, okay, there could be some good elements, but it doesn't have like that, I guess, intangible pull that other scripts do. When you're reading it and you're like, oh my god, I never want this to end. Or like you were saying, you can visualize it. You feel like you're eavesdropping. That's a great way to describe it. I love that. Like, if someone said that about my script, I'd be swooning. So those are all super helpful, I think, for people who are writing scripts, and want sort of like, what are people looking for, because stories and like the content, can vary, but there's sort of other subtler things, I think, that really impact how people perceive your scripts, which is interesting, also scary and confusing, but that's Hollywood. I guess it's like a final question. We're coming up on our time here. I want to first thank you for joining us. It's been so fun to learn more about your journey, what brought you there. You had some really great practical and also amorphous tips to people. And I want to know, what would you say to your younger self who had just graduated college, is maybe feeling a little bit lost and confused and conflicted? What would you say to her?
I think as creative people that are like in this industry or looking to break in, like, it's very easy to be like, I'm not good enough. I have to work harder. I have not been staffed because of X, Y, and Z. When really that's not the case. So much of this is timing, and so much of it is out of your control, that I don't think that especially like creative people should be that hard on themselves. Like, it's rough out there, especially like right now. Like, there are no jobs. Yeah, to just like give yourself some grace, have fun. You don't have to write as soon as you wake up and then write all the way until you go to sleep. Like, yeah, you should be writing, but it doesn't have to feel like a chore all the time. And yeah, I feel like if you do fun things outside of writing, outside of like what you consider your career, then it just opens you up a lot creatively. And yeah,
have fun.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a fun job. Like, you shouldn't feel like you're gonna die.
Thank you for taking us back to earth.
Yeah.
That, I think, is the most important advice out of this entire conversation. It's not that deep. You'll be okay. Have fun.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Annie.